Welcome everyone, Costin here with my Paladin guide for the World of Warcraft Burning Crusade Classic Pre-Patch and what you should be doing in order to prepare yourself for Burning Crusade. We have less than 2 weeks from the launch of the pre-patch until Burning Crusade Classic goes out. And there's plenty of things you can do to prepare yourself for TBC. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about just consumables or some pieces of gear, though you should absolutely get yourself maybe a Skull Flame shield or a Demon Forge breastplate. The breastplate in particular is my preferred item, Skull Flame less so. But outside of obvious things like getting consumables, getting some pieces of gear like that, there are plenty of things you can and should do. The question is why? Why should you bother pushing yourself in the pre-patch? Beyond just like getting to 60, taking a chill, if you're a blood elf, maybe getting a few pieces of gear. Why should you push yourself to try and get as much as possible? The answer to that comes down to Burning Crusade leveling in its own right. See, in Burning Crusade leveling, as a paladin, you want to level as protection. Even if you're playing on your own, if you get a certain amount of spell power, you will be faster than Holy, and you will be faster than Retribution. Paladin is pretty excruciating to level on your own in Burning Crusade, though, so you want to level in a group. And specifically, what you want to do is dungeon leveling. But here comes the problem. You are the best dungeon tank, but you need some gear to compete with all the fully raid-geared characters from vanilla, the tier 3 geared mages, warlocks, hunters in particular. Because if you don't have any gear and you're starting Burning Crusade, you're going to have a very, very rough time. Now, in theory, you could argue, well, Hellfire has plenty of quest rewards. Sure, it does, though there are certain items that it does lack, made up for in Zangarmarsh and even some of that in Terracar, but it does have some pieces of gear which you can use to get started. In fact, this is what I did on the beta. I got the pre-made character 58, got it to 60 for vanilla content, the Plague Lands in particular, and then then did a couple of quests in Hellfire and started doing Ramparts and Blood Furnace, and I was fine. I was tanking against tier 3 geared warlocks, mages, hunters, and I was doing fine. I was holding aggro. I wasn't really struggling. I had about 200 spell power. I was perfectly fine to tank against that. In fact, I was able to tank against pre-raid best in slot characters with full enchants, consumables at level 70 in the beta, and hold aggro against them. So 200, 300 spell power is more than enough to hold aggro. In fact, you'll probably make do with a lot less than that. So gear is for you to have a better leveling experience. And the problem is, if you can't quest, then your only option is to get as much gear as possible in vanilla, and that's the issue. In theory, you could do the quest before doing dungeons, but that's not likely to be a possibility. Maybe it is. Maybe Blizzard does give enough layers and respawn rates that's less of a problem. But personally, I'm going to take the view that on highly populated servers, at the very least, it's going to be next to impossible to do a large portion of quests. Partly because of the way those quests are designed. They're not designed in such a way as to accommodate a large number of players trying to do them at the same time. Even if they increase the spawn rates, it's just the way those quests were made. So having any kind of competition will slow you down significantly. But on top of that, you also have to consider the PvP aspect. Plenty of people will PvP. Hellfire will be a bloody mess. And then there is the issue of reputation. See, leveling in Burning Crusade won't just be about, oh, I want to get to 70 as quickly as possible. No, you want to do it in a smart way, so you can start jumping into dungeons, in heroic dungeons, to get your reputations up as quickly as possible, because that's going to matter in a fairly significant fashion, regardless of the class or spec that you're going to play. And for the sake of reputation, so you have less grinding to do at 70, you want to do dungeons first, and then you want to do quests later. Maybe while leveling, maybe once you get to 70, but you want to start doing dungeons. So with Hellfire, you want to jump into the Hellfire Citadel dungeons. You want to jump into Ramparts. You want to jump into Blood Furnace. And then when you're going in Zangarmarsh, you want to jump into Slave Pens and you want to jump into Underbog. Because when you're doing these dungeons, you can get up to Honored Reputation if you do that first. If you do the quests first, well, the dungeons won't give you reputation past Honored. So you want to do the dungeons first, get the Honored reputation close to it, then do quests so you can get as close to Revered as possible, which will unlock the heroic keys. And on top of that, dungeon leveling is going to be far more efficient and far more quick. Hellfire Ramparts can give you 50 to 60k XP per run. That's worth 5-6 quests. And you can do it faster, much faster than doing 5 or 6 quests. The most efficient way to level in Burning Crusade is for dungeon leveling, and you want to have as much gear as possible from vanilla for the sake of that. Partly because of the issues that you'll have questing, and partly because as I said, there are some pieces that you won't have an easy replacement for in BC, especially when it comes to a good spell power weapon. If you have a weapon that's over 50, 60 spell power coming from vanilla, you will not replace that weapon until you're level 70. That's how big that is. That's one of the bigger items. There's some other items like trinkets, neck, rings, all that kind of stuff that you will find it more difficult to replace than some other items. Some armor pieces in particular as well, you can use those easily until level 70. So with that said, if you're playing a Blood Elf, how should you tackle the leveling in the TBC pre-patch? Now obviously this guide in general is going to be aimed more at Blood Elves than Alliance Paladins. I assume Alliance Paladins will at least have some of the things, some of the gear pieces that they'll want for TBC, though they should certainly aim to get as much as possible if they haven't done so already. But for a Blood Elf, how should you tackle the issue of leveling? Well, Eversong and Ghostlands are very good and efficient leveling zones. You shouldn't worry about dungeon leveling until you're level 20. See, Burning Crusade leveling in a nutshell isn't necessarily about killing mobs, it's about doing as many quests as possible. And the questing experience, at least in Eversong and in the Ghostlands, should be very efficient. If it's not efficient, if it's a problem, if you're Horde, go do Ragefire Chasm. Get boosted in Ragefire Chasm from 10, maybe even earlier. Get as much experience. But if you can do it, dependent on the spawn rates, really, if you can do it, just level up in Eversong, level up in Ghostlands, get to 20 higher. Get as many quests as possible done in Eversong. Then you should be about 11, 12, maybe even 13. Then move on to the Ghostlands. Get to over level 20, then do Shadowfang Keep. And after that, there's plenty of vanilla leveling guides that you can follow, though there are going to be some adjustments that people should make to their leveling route. There are changes that Blizzard introduced in Burning Crusade, so the removal of elite mobs in quite a lot of quests is one of those. The experience requirement being lowered by about 20%, quests giving you 40% extra experience. All those kind of things are going to change the leveling experience, but for the most part, the kind of strategies and guides will still work. And dungeon leveling will still be key once you're 20, maybe even before that. So Shadowfang Keep, Scarlet Monastery, Zul'Farrak, and then on. So just follow those guides and guides, and don't be afraid of getting boosted. Either pay for it or get a friend or get guildies to help you out. I mean, if you're playing a Blood Elf, you should totally go to your guild because it's not just your problem, it's their problem. Because of the decisions that Blizzard has made with regards to pre-patch, because of the fact that we have the pre-patch that's going to last less than 2 weeks, then we have the full launch, and because they announced it the way they have without enough notice in advance, because of all of these issues, it's going to be a mess. A lot of guilds are going to struggle. A lot of guilds are going to struggle, in particular with paladins on the Horde side and shamans on the Alliance side. So don't be afraid to go to your guild and tell them, hey, can you help me out with this? You want to get to 60 as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. Don't waste your time. Don't level on your own. It's a waste of time. You want to get as much done as possible once you're 60. Don't bother trying to solo level or anything like that. Yeah, the boosting system, the way leveling is being handled in Classic with the boost and all that, that's what you want to do. Spec-wise, while leveling, you may want to go Retribution or you may want to go Holy. Some people would even go Protection because there is a viable path of leveling as Protection. Once you get to a certain level, like your initial talent point should go in Retribution. Once you're like level 30, you may consider respecking. If you're doing a lot of dungeon boosts, hey, you might want to go Holy, heal the mage, maybe you have a warrior. In some cases, I think warriors actually will be very, very strong actually for dungeon boosting. But if you do have a mage, or you have someone boosting you, just go Holy, heal them up. And once you are 60, you actually want to play as Holy. Don't try playing around with Retribution and Protection. That's a waste of time. the reason it's a waste of time is you will not have the gear, even if you get very lucky, you will not have the gear to be able to be a proper tank or a proper DPSer. And Holy is just, you're going to get carried either way. If you're going to raid, if your guild is going to help you out with that, you're going to get carried either way. Or in some cases, some people will obviously go join gold bed runs and just pay for the gear that they want. Even in those cases, it's probably recommended to be holy rather than protection or retribution. But the main reason you want to be holy is you will be doing a lot of PvP. So you can go heal, just pure heal spec, or you can go Shakaden spec. You have those options, and that's what I recommend for the sake of vanilla, for the sake of the pre-patch. Once TBC comes out, you want to go protection, but I'll touch on that in just a bit, what spec you would want to go for TBC, for actual TBC leveling. But either way, you'll be playing holy. Now, in terms of your priorities at 60, get to 60 as quickly as possible. Once you are at 60, what should you do? Well, one of the things you should do if you have a guild that you can raid, or you're going to join a pug, a gold bid run, or anything like that, you want to get your raid attunements done. All right, you want to get attuned to Blackwing Lair, you want to potentially get attuned to Naxxramas. So that means doing Scholomance or Stratholme, whatever your preference is. If you care about doing Naxxramas, I think it's a bit of a stretch for a lot of people to do Nax. You will absolutely need a guild to help you out in all of this, regardless, or friends to help you out with this. If you're going to do Nax, yeah, worry about the reputation. Outside of that, don't care about dungeons. Don't even consider they exist. Don't worry about dungeons at level 60 outside of the attunement process. Raiding-wise, you want to do as many AQ20s, Zul'Gurubs, and you want to do Blackwing Lair, AQ40, and Naxxramas potentially. Don't worry about Molten Core. Yeah, there are some items you could use in Molten Core, but it's not really worth the effort. Maybe there's one item, a spellcaster item, that you can get from Molten Core, but honestly, prioritize AQ and ZG in particular. They'll also do Blackwing Lair and AQ40 and Nax. I'd say Blackwing Lair is the main thing you should really focus on if you have a choice. If you want to focus your efforts on anything, focus on doing Blackwing Lair and of course the 20-man raids in ZG and AQ. But there are some gear pieces in Blackwing Lair that are really good and very useful, and you can use them for a good amount of time. Outside of that, you want to PvP. Why is that? Well, because you can get the rank 13 and rank 14 gear at level 60 in the pre-patch without having those ranks. The rank requirements are removed. The gear is just available for honor and tokens. And that's what you want to do. You want to spend as much time as possible in battlegrounds, especially Arathi Basin, because that's where most of the gear will be acquired from. And that's what you want to do with your time. You either get the epic gear or you get the blue gear. Depends on the time here. Keep in mind that the gear pieces, regardless of whether or not they're blue or epic, they still require a lot of tokens. So it's a question of how much honor can you get, really, from these battlegrounds. How much honor can you farm, and in what kind of period of time will you be able to farm it? What kind of items should you prioritize? That's a big question. Well, I would say that you should prioritize shoulders, helmet, and boots, along with a weapon. Those are the items that you should prioritize above others. Trinkets as well, because getting trinkets in TBC is going to be difficult. But getting a good spellcaster weapon is going to be pretty important in Burning Crusade Classic if you can get it in the pre-patch from vanilla. And just to look at an example of what kind of gear you'd want to have on your Paladin going into TBC, it will look something like this. Now, how reasonable this actually is, that's a different discussion. Considering this aspirational, something you would want to achieve if possible, but some of these gear pieces you absolutely won't be able to get. Like if you're telling me someone's going to get a Lochamir, Elementium, and an Neltharion tier, and as well as Stylene in just 2 weeks, yeah, okay, some people will be that lucky. Many people probably will be lucky to even get one of these items. Of these items, though, the one that really matters for the sake of leveling is Lochamir, just because of that 84 spell damage. That's going to be really important. It's better than any weapon you will get in BC while you're actually leveling. If you don't get the spell damage weapon, you do have one from, you do have a High Warlord healing weapon. It's less powerful. Let's be clear, it's also very expensive, but you can use it. The actual caster weapon for High Warlord is a dagger, and you can't use daggers. Of items that you would actually use at level 70 as a tank, styling Scarab is the best trinket when it comes to helping you with your crush cap, because between the combination of defense and block rating, you get more than any other item, even in TBC. It's the best trinket for the sake of the crush cap. Don't underestimate that. Other items are not quite so important. So you have the Warlord's helm, shoulders, chest, and then general gloves and pants and boots. As I said, out of these items, shoulders, you'll have a difficult time getting any spell damage. Plate shoulders or boots. You want to use plate, for the record. Don't buy into the nonsense that some people are spewing. Oh, you'll use mail. No, you want plate. Things in Burning Crusade, even if you will smash through Hellfire and Ramparts and then Slave Pins and Underbog, things in Burning Crusade can and will end up hitting you quite hard. So actually get plate with spell power for all the limitations you have. I mean, if you're going to use any mail item or anything like that, it's because you don't have other options. That's how you should view it. But outside of the PvP items that you have available, you have Judgment Bindings, Judgment Belt, and then rings from raids, trinkets, of course. Maybe a Librum of Truth, by the way, doesn't really matter. If you can get it, great. If not, don't give a crap about it. And neck is from AQ20, from the AQ20 quests from Assyrian. So this is what you should aspire for. By the way, spec-wise, at level 60, just to talk about that for a bit, this is what you'd want for your spec when TBC actually launches. You'd want to be holy, as I said, in actual vanilla until TBC launches, but once it launches, once you're going through the Dark Portal, this is what you'd want to have. The main thing is having Reckoning, because Reckoning is going to be very powerful when you're tanking a lot of mobs in the early dungeons, and you're going to use it for not just the sake of threat, but also the sake of mana. Mana management is going to be one of your concerns. Probably the biggest concern, actually, more so than just raw threat. It's when you're doing a lot of dungeons, you want to minimize the amount of drinking you're doing. You want to minimize the amount of mana you're spending. There's quite a bit to handle that, like how many consecrations are you doing, how many spells are you casting, all that kind of stuff. Personally, I view Reckoning as being very useful with Seal of Wisdom, and then Judgment of Wisdom, and then just using Consecration for the sake of threat. And those are the kind of things you want to care about as a Paladin in the pre-patch. How much of this you achieve is up to you, really. It's a pretty bad situation, what we're going to deal with. And Blizzard's decision to launch Burning Crusade with less than 2 weeks of pre-patch and just put that announcement has caused a mess in the community. There's going to be plenty of problems. There's going to be a shortage of Paladins on the Horde side, and there's going to be an enormous shortage of Shamans on the Line side. And a lot of guilds will struggle because of this, to be very, very clear. Anyway, Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.